It's been a while since I've done this. Got to share my testimony maybe 2 or 3 times over the last 7 or 8 years. And it's always been a blessing to do so for me, just being reminded of what's happened in my life and taken place. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to this, a little bit nervous, because I've never done it in front of a crowd this big. So. But yeah, if we could pray before we get going. Dear Lord, thank you for this day that you gave us to get together and worship you. I just pray that the truth of you would come out today, and while I'm speaking, and that I would get out of the way, and just that your grace would just make itself known to everyone here. And we just thank you for all our journeys that you've given us to this point, and what you have planned for us in the future. In your name we pray, amen. So I got notes here. We'll see if I follow them or not, because I'm not very good at doing that, and I'm kind of a rebel, so let's see. I think the first thing I wanted to say was this whole journey has kind of felt like, I feel like Bilbo Baggins a little bit on his setting out on his quest. And what I mean by that is I just remember him in the movie trying to get his favorite pocket handkerchiefs and all the little possessions he thinks he's going to need for this journey. And turned out he didn't really need many of them. God has had plans for me that I had no idea of, and yeah. So one of my favorite quotes I wanted to start with too was C.S. Lewis. I got a few of those here today. The first one was about friendship, and this is just kind of what I have felt in this church and through other believers that I've got to share with. And it was it's called Friendship. Is born at the moment when one man says to another, "What, you too? I thought I was the only one." And that's what I've seen with being able to share just what's happened in my life, and then in return, people have shared what's happened in their life, and it's pretty cool to see all the things that I had no idea of in doing so. And it's just brought me closer together with a lot of people in ways I couldn't imagine. So I'll start out with just kind of, so I was adopted at 13 months, and what happened was my biological dad, he was raised in a really rough family, one of 24 kids, believe it or not, same mom. And he had a dad that was super abusive, about the worst ways you could think. And so he had a really, really rough childhood. And my mom had a rough childhood too. Not as bad, but they grew up in Newport, Washington. And so they got together and had me, and then my dad ran around quite a bit, and I got quite a few siblings that I don't know half of them. But they got back together. I have 2 other full brothers who are younger than me, and another brother, half brother, who's older than me. But needless to say, what went down was my mom had to work because my dad couldn't. He was a drinker, just trying to cope with his childhood and everything. And so he was non-functional, and my mom was working, and so she had to have her sister babysit me and my older half-brother. And turned out her sister's boyfriend was abusive. And so the government decided that she couldn't take care of us, and we were adopted out. And luckily, I got to go to the best home I could have ever got. Christian parents, they're here today, Dick and Joan Roberson. And I got a childhood that, looking now at a lot of childhoods that people are having, I don't know how I got so lucky. Christian parents out in the country, hardworking dad, hardworking mom, and they loved me and my other adopted brother. Got adopted around the same age. and they raised us about as well as you could hope. I don't want to get off course here too much. Let's see here. So, I mean, we now having kids and kind of looking at what they did, my goal is to kind of do what they did with us. I mean, they steeped us in C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and Little House on the Prairie and fed us about as good a food as you could want, and did everything that me and my wife are trying to do right now for our kids. But growing up, we went to the Abbey Church right down the road here. And as a kid, Jesus wasn't much more than just him on a flannel board for me. The stories were mediocre, interesting. I wasn't sure if they were true, I guess. I didn't put much thought into it growing up. But I just kind of was always reserved thinking about them, I guess. I'm not sure quite how to put it, but maybe I just didn't put too much thought into it. It was just kind of, well, that's what we do on Sundays. And I had other things going on in life that were more important, like fighting the bully at church and showing off for girls. So that's where I first met Brittany. Started a hate club against her. My two best friends. So that was, cool. Let's see here. The Addie Church had a vacation Bible school that they would do every summer, and I remember one in particular. I don't know how old I was, maybe 8 or so, and we were meeting out in the middle of the field up on a hill, and Benny Arnell was running it, and going to church, you hear you need to ask Jesus into your heart, John 3:16 over and over again, and so out of fear, I remember when he asked us if we want to accept God into our heart, like, oh man, I do not want to go to hell. So I probably asked God into my heart 10 times during the service. And then I got home and I counted 150 times I did it on my bed that afternoon afterwards. And I still wasn't sure. The closest I could say that I had with a relationship with God at that point was just riding on my bike down on our dirt road, and my brother Jesse has always been obsessed with weather and clouds, and so I glanced up at him maybe more than your average guy, just in empathy, just, yes, those are nice cumulonimbus clouds. But I did eventually, maybe I do glance up a little more often than your average person and do enjoy the beauty of the skies. And so riding my bike down on our dirt road, I would kind of talk to God a little bit. But I never really heard anything back. It was just, I was hoping for some kind of connection. Around that age, like all boys, you kind of trying to figure out what you want to be when you grow up. And my parents had gotten me In Freedom's Cause by G.A. Henty. And I fell in love with the character Archibald Forbes, which is, he's like the right-hand guy of William Wallace, if you've ever watched Braveheart. And I wanted to be a warrior of some sort when I got older. That just was the epitome of everything I felt like I was and wanted to be. And so me and my two best friends, Blake and Evan Donnelly and Jesse, and whatnot, just spent our whole childhood building forts and tree houses and stick fighting in any patch of shrubs that we could find and setting ambushes and whatnot. And then as I got older, about 12, started doing odd jobs around the community. Well, that's jumping ahead. But let's see here. Oh, and my parents got me into Irish dance too. And I got to know, I danced with Brittany a little bit, but just wasn't really paying attention. Had others I was trying to impress at the time. So that was up till about age 12. Age 15 to 17, worked at the Wind Street Nursery a little bit, Ended up working for Bill Kimball at his stove shop too. Later on, that was about 18, I guess. And my favorite hobbies were in the summer, just getting off work and going to the river with my friends, jumping cliffs, snowboarding in the winter, and whatnot. Just anything adventurous that you kind of get a little adrenaline rush out of. At 16, I ended up leaving home. I'd gotten my biological mom had written my mom a letter saying she'd like to meet me, and if it was okay, if I could come down to Denver and meet her and my biological dad and my 3 brothers. And so I was becoming kind of a problem at home and pretty rebellious, and so I think I needed to get out of there and stop causing problems. So it was a great opportunity to take care of both issues. And so I got to go down there in the summer and hunt out for I think 2 months down there, and pretty much all we did was play video games and run around at night in downtown Denver and try and find trouble, which luckily we did not, because there was some trouble to find. But all in all, it was a pretty great summer. I just clicked like that with my brothers and really related with them, and so that was pretty cool. Came back for a couple months, I believe, and then they moved up to Blaine, Washington, and so I decided I'd move over there. And there was a house over there with some other Christian families that I think my biological parents had known from before. I had no clue who they were, but we moved in, and it was a big house with a 2-car garage. There was 13 people there, and it was, I think, 4 different families. So it was a weird situation, but it was me and my brothers out in the garage. We had our bedrooms out there, and all I did was work at Subway on I-5 and do some odd jobs. I think the lowest point over there was I was working in some horse stables, mucking horse manure for a witch, and I would listen to Eminem all day in a pouring rain. And then I got to go home and ride the bus home, stinking like horse manure and watching everybody try and get away from me. So after that, my parents kind of, I think, set it up with my older brother Alan, who was in Alaska, and I think they knew that was a pretty weird situation over there and wanted me to get out of there, and it was. These people were, I think some of them truly were saved, but there were some wacko conferences I went to where there was a lot of synthy music and praying in tongues, and I got baptized 1 or 2 times, and I still don't quite know what all that was about, and I don't know if I want to know. So I went to Alaska, did construction up there for the summer, got to know my brother Alan a little better, and that was pretty cool. Alaska's a beautiful place, and I'd love to visit there more often. But I got to go there a few times. My parents were really good about taking us on trips up there. Some of them more wild than others. I remember going out to an island in the middle of a storm in this little aluminum boat with our friends, and I didn't know if we were going to make it or not. And then we ended up making it, and then we got to this old cabin in the woods on this very small island, and I remember getting in there and opening up the chest of drawers, and there was like 14 mice inside there just scurrying around. It was Alaska. We went to some very remote places up there. Their friends were a little adventurous, and so yeah, it was fun. It was very good memories, flying in bush planes and stuff up there and whatnot. So after that, I came back down here and started doing dance again. I'd kind of gone to a couple schools over on the coast, but it wasn't really working out too much. But came back here, started up again. Brittany was there, and I didn't notice her at first until one of my brothers, my younger brother, came over, and we pulled up to the studio one day because I was going to practice, and he's like, "Ooh, who's that girl?" And I thought, "Hey, stop that." And that was when I first noticed Brittany. And we started courting. What year was it? Do you remember? 2018. And we courted for a year, and then we got to travel the country and travel France doing dance. And I should have proposed in France, but I didn't get a ring in time, so that happened when we got home. And we got married a year later at Andrew Senior's place, which was beautiful. So once I got married, getting married was one of the big check marks in my life. Becoming a warrior, getting married, those are the two biggest things. And once I checked that box, I'm like, okay, I'm set. I got everything I need. My days consisted of, I go to work, I come home, that's when I started drinking, just a little at first, and I just get a six-pack, I turn on the PlayStation, and I game till 10 o'clock or 2 in the morning every night, and then go to sleep, wake up, go to work, and I was about as happy as I could be. I didn't need anything else from anybody, and every now and then I'd go out with my friends, but I'd started going out less and less with my friends because I didn't need them as much. Jared came and stayed with us for about a year. He had just gotten married, and they needed a place to stay, and that was a really good time bonding with him and whatnot. But me and Brittany had been renting a place in Rice, and it's from this couple hippie couples got together and decided to build these green homes, and it, as you can imagine, didn't work out very well. And so I got this beautiful, super insulated home on 280 acres for $500 a month to rent, and a whole hillside with cliffs to climb and everything. And but there was something weird about that place. There was an old house right next to the new one. And I remember a couple nights waking up and just feeling a presence of darkness. And Brittany felt it too at the same time. And Jared was always sensitive to that stuff. And I remember when he was staying with us, he told me one night something was downstairs. He could feel it. And we had the blender turn on one night just out of the blue, things like that. And I found out years ago with a coworker, I found out it was actually his grandpa's place. And the old farmstead house, he used to stay in there after his grandparents passed away, and he would hear noises upstairs all the time. So we were pretty sure there was something going on there. And those kind of things, when that happened, I think it happened 1 or 2 times, it scared me, and I would pray, and it would go away. But besides that, I wasn't talking to God, I wasn't thinking about him that much. I had video games, and beautiful wife, and booze, and work, and I didn't need anything else. So the next 5+ years, it just things, I had what I needed, but I started to just need a little more of everything. And I started listening to podcasts at this time, probably listened to every Joe Rogan episode there was. And maybe some of his guests and stuff, I listened to their podcasts, and I started to entertain other worldviews. That was one thing I had never delved into much, what other worldviews were, how Christian worldview would have differences, in belief from these other worldviews, and how to, I didn't have any arguments against these worldviews, I guess is what I'm saying. I had no defenses. And so this was all new to me. So I'm getting bombarded by what I'm hearing all day long while I'm working with these podcasts. I'm coming home, I'm getting in a different reality with my games. I'm medicating myself while doing that. And eventually, I pretty much became agnostic. I didn't know what was true, because it all seemed like it was on the same plateau. Everything seemed about as real as the next. It's all hearsay. Yeah, you're a Christian. That's great, you had an experience. I sure haven't. It don't feel any more real to me than anything else. There's no proof of it that and I'm sure, I am absolutely sure I heard plenty of proof, but there was blinders on. I was blind, and it just could not penetrate. So I became openly agnostic at that point. I told Brittany I don't know what is true. Probably by age 26 or 7, something there. I actually got to the point one day at work, me and my coworker talked about quite a bit of stuff. I was probably the annoying guy who was always bugging him, and he was already married with kids and everything. I was just, shut up, let's work, and I'm always babbling on. And I told him one day, I was like, he was kind of a professing Christian, but didn't go to church or do any, nothing. And I told him one day, I was like, if there's no God, then screw him. What's he gonna care? He's not there to hear me say screw him, so screw him. And I used more vulgar language than that. And he was really bothered by that. He's like, don't do that, like don't. And I didn't understand the kind of the stupidity of saying something like that, because if he didn't exist, then why was that bothering to say screw him? Like, why did I feel the need? And so, here's something I just actually ran into a couple months ago, was the word, hold on here, sorry, I'm trying to find my notes. The word Yahweh in Hebrew, the way it's actually pronounced cannot be pronounced, from what I hear. It's actually the sound of you breathing out and then in. And so all of us actually speak God's name, just living and existing. And the fact that he's the breath of life actually kind of makes that kind of cool. And it's also kind of funny how anytime, I'm cursing or anybody else is cursing too, it's not Allah that I'm cursing. It's not Buddha. It's always God. I know exactly where my focus is. We know who God is. That's why we're focused, using his name in such a way. So there was a few things that still struck me as interesting when it came to Christianity. I was always, because I had a kind of relationship with C.S. Lewis's works, the Narnia series was really impactful. I still listen to that series over and over today. And especially his book, The Screwtape Letters, really impacted me. There's a few times through these years where there's a part of the Screwtape Letters where it's talking about somebody who's a complainer and how if things are left to progress, eventually the complaints become more and more frequent, and it's almost like the person stops to exist and all that is left is the complaint, the moaning, the grumbling. And there was people in my life, most of my friends at this point were, I'd say friends, acquaintances, people I hung out with. Most of them were online, and there was a few people online that I would game with who started to get under my skin because I felt that's exactly what they were becoming. And that point, I was running a clan of about 200 guys. We ran one of the top teams in the world. And so I was living it up. I could get online and do competitions and everything, and felt like I was hot stuff. And then the drinking, I just started to not get quite as satisfied, and I started to drink more, and I started to do edibles. And at that point, I started to slowly feel, I wasn't quite as sharp at the games, and I started to slip a little bit, and my friend group kind of, except for my close friends, kind of started to drift away. And I found myself complaining more and more. Oh, this game sucks. Oh, it's not fair. And I could just feel this thing under my skin just starting to be like, what's going on here? Are you becoming the complainer? Is all that is left of you going to be the complaint? And I felt more, I no longer felt like I was feeding life to the party when I was hanging around people. I started to feel like a sink drain, just sucking the life out of people. And that's kind of what these things that started to come in my life was, there wasn't anything in here. It was outflowing, it was grabbing. Everything started to become taking. So here's one analogy I really liked. I saw the other day on Twitter. It's the love analogy. When God wanted to create fish, he spoke to the sea. When God wanted to create trees, he spoke to the earth. But when God wanted to create man, he turned to himself Then God said, let us make man in our image and in our likeness. If you take a fish out of water, it will die. And when you remove a tree from soil, it will also die. Likewise, when man is disconnected from God, he dies. Okay, so yeah, at this point, I'm just listening to stuff that makes me feel better on podcasts and stuff. I'm just hanging around people who make me feel better. I'm just taking the drugs that make me feel better. I'm doing stuff online that makes me feel better. So the bottom of the barrel was 2016. At that point, there was a day where I told Brittany there was a woman that I love more than her. And it killed me because she had been nothing but good to me. And I thought, how can I say this to her? And I didn't love this woman. I just lost it after. I thought, how can I do this to this person? I swore in front of 300 people or so that I would love her for the rest of my life. This is who I'm becoming. So, I don't know how she didn't kick me out of the house or bump me over the head, but she said, well, maybe if we have a kid or something, maybe we won't focus on our lives so much and us. And right now I'm thinking, oh, that was a disastrous idea. So that was during the summer, 2016. And through the rest of that year, I was just struggling to find life. I started jumping off bigger cliffs, started doing things that I thought would get people's attention or impress people. Did more drugs, started doing Kratom. I do Kratom during the day, which is, if you don't know what that is, sold at any gas station here, but I'm not promoting it. But it's an opiate, and it kind of gives you a euphoria like weed, but caffeine intensity, so you can focus. Just kind of not really. So I do that during the day. So I'm medicating the whole time I'm awake now. So this takes me, I'm just surviving until January 17th, 2017. So Brittany had just found out she's pregnant, I don't know, a couple weeks before this. So this day, I go to work. We're working on one of the churches there in Kettle and doing construction. I started doing construction when I was 18. Been doing it for quite a few years at this point. And went to work that day. We got off early, about 2 p.m. And I thought, okay, cool. I get to start gaming earlier than normal. That would be fun. So I went to the weed store, picked up some edibles. Brittany was teaching dance. So she was gone. So I was like, sweet, don't have to worry about her judging me. Got home and sat down. I was like, shoot, Bill Burr's new special's out. I love him. I'm gonna check that out. So I started watching him. And stuff started kicking in, but something was wrong this time. I'd taken Kratom that morning. Normally, it had worn off by the time I got off work, which is 4:30, and then I'd do weed and drink, and so the two didn't mingle much. But I forgot about that, so I started a little earlier that day. And I was watching the special, and I was really paying attention to I felt like I was really paying attention to what he was saying, and I was starting to have issues with what he was saying, and it wasn't quite clicking with, so Bill Burr had been on Joe Rogan's podcast quite a bit, they're friends, and what Bill Burr was saying, I started to kind of just dive into where that thought would lead to, and I'm like, okay, but that doesn't click with what this other guest was saying on Rogan's podcast, that I also kind of agreed with. And then there's, this new thing that he'd say in another bit, and kind of lead me off a different road. And all of a sudden, I just was overwhelmed. And I'm like, and I couldn't slow these thoughts down. I was like, okay, I gotta stop. And so I shut it off. And I'm looking at the clock, and it's 4:20. Brittany gets home at 5:30 from class. And I'm like, okay, just stay calm, just sit in your chair, and survive this, and Brittany will get home, and she'll take care of you and tell you it's okay. And I kept looking at the clock every, what felt like 10 minutes. That hand did not change. It stayed right there at 4:20. And I started freaking out. And I'm like, okay, I need a cold shower. That'll wake me up out of this, and I'll just go to sleep or something. So I get in the shower, and I'm in the fetal position after a moment, just like, oh my gosh. And I don't know if you ever remember, if you've seen the Thor movies, where there's that whole, it's like a rainbow road that goes to the Stargate or whatever it is, the teleporter that they use to get to other worlds. And it's just like open space. Just, you can see constellations and galaxies and everything beyond that Stargate. And I felt like I was entering this void of blackness. It was like there was a bottomless pit. And what it was just all these worldviews bombarding me, and where I could go to with my, just leading down what the implications were of these worldviews, it just felt like it could go to infinity, and it was just confusion. It was a pit of confusion. And I knew that, well, let me restate this. There's also, if you remember, there's some of those paintings of when sailors believed there was an actual edge to the world, and there was kind of a waterfall at the edge of the world. And you would see these depictions of, old clipper ships and stuff teetering on the edge and about to go over. And I felt like I was on the edge, and I was in that ocean, and I was bobbing up and down, and out there in the void, there was no stars, there was no beauty. It was the bottomless pit, because it can always get worse. The farther down you go, and you'll never stop going down. And I knew that if I went over that edge, I was going to lose my sanity. And I didn't want to know what happened. And I started to panic, really panic. And this time thing had not stopped. I was like, I don't know what's going on, but time is not stopping, and Brittany is never going to get here. And if I have to put up with this for 5 more minutes, I'm going to go in my room and get my pistol out and park a 45 in my brain pan. Because this is, I can't live with this. So at that moment, I said, God, I want to live to be there for my son when he's born. Please. And I heard this voice that said, well, what about Jesus? What about God? I said, that's so simple, it's stupid. I said, you don't have a choice. I said, okay. And at that moment, I was floating in the ocean, and I was about to go over, and this rock appears about 5 feet away. And I reach for it, and immediately, it's like I'm tethered a cable to it. It grabbed me before I could even touch it. All I had to do was reach. And I felt like it was an anchor now. And I just felt peace. I turned the shower off, I went, lay down, and went to sleep. And I knew there was a God. So I woke up the next morning, and we had a trip to the coast to see my brothers. I don't know if it's G-Man's wedding. And I knew there was a God, and I knew Jesus was a part of that. And I told Brittany, and she was maybe a little confused, maybe not sure whether to believe it or not. But I was like, I don't know anything about him, but I want to search in that direction, kind of thing. So 40 days later, let me find my notes again here. while I was writing this down too, this verse came up the other day. That was comforting. It says, this is Psalms 139:9 through 10. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the outermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. So March 24th or 25th, I can't remember, same year, 40 days later, which I found out had some meaning to it, which was really cool a couple years later after thinking through it. I was still drinking. I was still doing edibles. I think I quit the kratom. That scared the bananas out of me. And this time Brittany was gone too. So I sat down in my lazy boy. I take my lazy boy and I park it about 5 feet away from my 60-inch, TV, and game that way. Well, this day I was going to do that, and then I'm like, oh shoot, that new movie Hacksaw Ridge came out, and I love war movies. My biggest desire is to be a warrior, and gaming was kind of an easy way out there because I didn't have to do any of the work and I could have all the fun and medicate while I was doing it. So like, oh shoot, I'm gonna watch that. That'll be fun. And how many of you have seen that movie?
I've seen it once.
Okay, cool. So the movie is it's World War II. This boy, he goes to fight in the Pacific, and he's a conscientious objector. So he's a medic, and he has some issues when he first gets in the military. They're not really cool with him not holding a gun, and but he kind of shows them that he's going to be useful, and he's a medic and can do his job just fine without having a weapon. So I sat down and started watching this movie, and the first thing I remember impacting me was the scene where he's roughhousing with his brother in the yard, and they would kind of get on each other's nerves like siblings do. But during their fight, he picks up a brick and just kind of whacks his brother over the head with it, and almost really badly hurt his brother. And his parents freak out and are trying to make sure his brother's okay. And in the hallway where he grew up are the 10 Commandments. And the one, do not murder, just kind of pops out at him. In the way they do the movie, you can kind of see he's just, all of a sudden he's like, oh my gosh, I almost just killed my brother. And I was just angry with him, but I almost ended up actually killing him. And at the time, I wasn't really thinking through it in this way, but I think the reason that first scene impacted me was because hate had really crept into my life. I was hating more things. Everything was somebody else's fault, more and more so. And I was getting very defensive because of who I was becoming. I was becoming everybody's enemy, slowly. So, seeing that, now thinking back, probably the reason that impacted me was because, as Jesus puts it, the first commandment isn't just murder, it's hating somebody in your heart, which is as good as murder. And that's what I was doing, I was murdering people in my life, in my mind, in my heart. And so I just remember watching that and just being like, okay, what's going on here? This has really got my attention. I'm going to read Matthew 5:21 through 22 real quick. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court, and anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. And I was doing plenty of you fools. I still do that, just a little bit. So as this movie's going on, this guy's, he's entering his first battle, and I'm identifying with all his buddies who are armed to the teeth and ready to go for it and fight the Japanese. And what they got to do is they got to climb up this rope ladder, up this cliff, first thing, when they hit the beach, and the Japanese are up top, all hunkered in, and they gotta storm their positions and clear them out. So they get up there, they do the first wave, and it doesn't go super well. A lot of them get hit and hurt, and so they have to retreat. And they're retreating because the U.S. Army is going to do an artillery barrage and kind of clear out resistance as they're retreating, and then maybe they can make it back in. So this medic, he retreats with the rest of the guys, and as he kind of gets back to where the cliff was, where they first came up, that artillery comes in and just makes a wall of death, just explosions. It's just, and you see him, he's like, what do you want me to do, God? Like, what is it that you have for me to do here? And you hear this voice call out for help. And he looks up at the sky and says, okay. And at that moment, it just clicked for me. I knew that my desire to be a warrior was so skewed. It wasn't about the person next to me. I had lied to myself. I thought it was. I just wanted violence. Here, this true warrior, in that moment, I saw Christ. As he said, okay, I will go save him, and I will run into that artillery barrage, even though it means certain death. And I'm going to save you. And I just felt like he was running to save me. And I thought, that is a warrior. And at that moment, fire just erupted on my seat above me. And I looked up, and there he was. And he said, are you ready for this? And I said, yeah. And he said, this will consume all of you. And I said, okay. And in that moment, between O and K, I felt it click. Holy Spirit came in. I felt complete. I felt peace. And I felt whole. And he vanished. And I started uttering in tongues scripture I'd forgotten from when I was a little kid. And the first one, I think, was God works in mysterious ways. So I didn't know what a vision was. Visions talked about in the Bible were the thing I understood the least and doubted the most. That sounded pretty freaking wacky to me. And I shut the movie off at that point, and I was just in awe. And I was laughing, and I knew what joy was for the first time. And just perfect peace. So, one thing, I was asking Brittany last night if I should share this, and she said, yeah, I think so. Thought it might make me sound a little effeminate, but we'll go for it. So, like in romantic movies where you got the guy and the girl, and I'm just thinking of specifically like where the girl really wants to get with this guy, and there's throughout the movie there's situations where it looks like she's gonna get together with him and it doesn't, and at the end it's like he finally pops the question, and she's so overwhelmed by this actually happening, she's kind of breathless, and just it's like, okay, I finally understood that. When I said, okay, I could barely believe this God would do that for me. And, I could barely get it out. But I just finally understood that. And I thought it was kind of funny because we're the bride of Christ. And I just felt this that Christ is going to complete us. There will be nothing lacking. And in that moment, I realized I will want for nothing forever. This is eternal source of joy, eternal source of glory, of just dumbfounded splendor. I still grasp to understand that. Even though I'm saying it now, it's like, I want to feel what I felt that moment a kid. And there's times where I get that, but don't worry, it's going to be freaking good when we get there. I'm looking forward to it. So, let me see, I went way past a lot of notes here, which is probably all right. Let me try and catch up here. So yeah, this kind of having this vision and stuff. At first I was like, nobody's gonna doubt this. Nobody's gonna not believe this story. I told Brittany when she got home and she was kind of like, what? But I was like, man, this is a freaking gift. Like, I'm gonna be able to witness to so many people and yada yada. And then after a while I'm like, people are gonna think I was just on drugs. Like, it's just, and like, yeah, junkie, all right, that was a good one. And I didn't realize, I was talking to my friend Blake, and he was telling me about like this little girl who had seen a vision of Jesus, and she had been in her parents were trying to make it across the Mediterranean or something, in a boat with a bunch of other immigrants, and she fell out the back as they were going along, and the guys steering the boat would not turn around and pick her up. And when they got to the beach, she was there sitting on the beach, and her parents ran up and hugged her, and was like, what happened? She's like, Jesus appeared in the water, and he grabbed me and set me here. And he's like, there's a lot of Muslims and stuff who have visions or dreams and will see Jesus, and it's more common probably in that culture or other cultures. I don't know, but I was like, wow, I didn't know that. So as time has gone on, let's see. One thing at first that was really a blessing was God's love kind of just felt like a black hole, like not in a bad sense, but in a sense where supposedly when you get close to a black hole, there's this event horizon that happens, and anything that gets close enough cannot escape the black hole at that point. Light itself can't. And I felt like that with God's love. There was no way I was getting out of it. It had me completely, and doubt was pretty minimal. Over a couple years, so process of sanctification started, which is, it's not like climbing a mountain, as Tolian Vision has put it. It's more like spelunking. You're kind of delving deeper and deeper down, and you get a little more frightened each time you get to another cave and there's something to discuss and bring out into the light. And that's what weed was a pretty easy one. God took care of that for me pretty quick. I've been doing it for about a year, and I had a situation. So this encounter with Christ happened in March. In May, I had a situation where I tried doing edibles for the last time, and I was listening to music, and I had like secular music and worship music, and I was going in between the two, and the secular music just dark. I felt attacked anytime I put it on. And then worship music, I ended up just shutting the music, or I ended up just playing worship music and just falling down on my knees in our sunroom and just worshiping God for the rest of being high. It was the most amazing worship. I literally felt my hands rise and I could not bring them down. But I felt a very clear message from God that this drug opens gates. And yes, I can come through that gate, but you don't need that. I will open that gate on my own, and you don't need unnecessary attacks on your life through that gate being opened, through that drug. And so the desire for it left, and I didn't have to struggle with it anymore, which was really nice. But alcohol latched on a lot harder and had its teeth in. I remember the first time, I don't know if it was the first time, but I got really drunk one night We were having a bonfire outside, and one of my friends wanted to know what happened to me, and I was like telling him, I only got to tell him part of the story, and then his friends didn't want to hear the rest of it, and so we started talking about other stuff, and then eventually I started puking. But as I'm puking, I'm like praising God, because I'm like, I'm not thinking about things I normally think of when I'm drunk. I'm actually like super joyful about what you've done for me. And I'm like, but I'm drunk still, so I know you don't like that, but thank you still for what you've done for me. But I started to just get these proddings. And eventually me and Brittany went on a camping trip with the rest of my biological brothers. And we have some political differences and stuff. And being all lubed up on gin one night, I decided to speak very openly. And some of my family members were hurt. And that next morning, I had a dream. And it's wacko, but I felt like I had the brain of a zombie or something. And I felt like I could not escape. I was schizophrenic, or I could not escape. Like my brain was not functioning right, and I was going insane. And it scared me. I woke up out of it, and it was super vivid, and I was just paralyzed with fear. And I actually asked Brittany, I'm like, can you pray for me? I am like shaking with fear right now. So she prayed with me, and I still did not feel right. So we were up in the Cascades. So I walked down this trail where there's this big stream, and it was ice cold, and I'm like, I'm gonna jump in there and try and get out of this. I jumped in there, still was freaking out. So I called Adam. I was like, I need help. I am struggling with this drinking problem, and I cannot escape it. And I just confessed to him all that I'd been doing, and he prayed with me. And then I just sat in the middle of this, amazing forest, and just opened the Bible, and God spoke to me through the Last Supper. I can't remember what he shared with me, but I felt like he covered my sins completely, and it was, I'll never forget it, but the message was becoming more and more clear. And my frailty was becoming more and more clear. And one of the most helpful things I ever heard was from Adam when I first became a Christian. And I was kind of struggling with, like, what do I do now? And he said, just be truthful. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, I'll try. So through God's mercy, I was able to stay open and honest with him and Brittany and whatnot. And so I had another, that was, I think, August or something that year. The next March, my brother came to visit me. We drank all night till about 4 a.m, and then he had to leave that morning. And I went to bed for about 4 hours, got up about 8, made some breakfast, and they left. And then I just felt it felt like a black hole had just appeared in the center of myself and was sucking life and everything out of me into it. It was like a dementor, And I collapsed on the floor. I had no energy to stand up. And I thought, okay, is this a physical reaction to the alcohol or something? I felt really good that morning beforehand. No hangover or anything. And eventually, I could barely speak. I was having trouble starting to breathe. And I said, babe, maybe we should go to the ER because I don't know what this is. So we dropped the kids off at a friend's on the way to the ER. I get there, and by the time I get to the ER, I'm feeling better. I'm feeling almost normal, just really uneasy about what's happened. And they do EKG and all the stuff, do all the tests. They're like, you're fine. Do you drink or something? And I said, yeah, I drink. I do a bunch of energy drinks during the day too. And they're like, well, maybe it's alcoholism, probably what it is. So I'm like, okay, well, this is new though, but okay, whatever. So I go home, and I feel it start again, right as I walk into my bedroom. And I'm like, this is spiritual. I can feel it. And if you ever watch The Walking Dead, there's, maybe you haven't, and you're lucky enough to not have gone past season 2. You get to the end, there's this character, Neeson, pretty dark character. He's got a baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire that he beats the living tar out of people with. And I felt like that baseball bat had been the epitome of where my addictions had led. The taking, the brutality, the violence, the lust, everything was just wrapped up in that baseball bat. I don't know how else to explain it. The name of that bat was Lucille. And I felt like that was the demon that was attacking me that day. And I told Adam that. And he prayed against it, and it lifted immediately. And I've never struggled with it since then, that darkness at least. I can't explain it further than that, but that's what happened. So we moved out of our place. At that point, sold it, moved in with Dwayne and Wendy in 2020. And those were pretty good years. I still struggled with drinking and just like looking at women looking the wrong way. I started to struggle a little bit with anger, I think, at that point. But I was keeping things together, forcing them together because I didn't want to look bad in front of family. And we have about a year and a half later, those were good years. About a year and a half later, we moved out and moved onto the property that we're at now. And I didn't have to perform as much when I was home. So I started bringing 30 packs home again on the weekends. And I started opening up cans in the car on the way home from work. And I started buying cigarettes. And I remember one night, I popped a cigarette in my mouth and was burning shrubs and stuff outside just during the spring. And Archie's like, "What's that, Dad, in your mouth?" And my mom smoked her whole life, and my brother got really addicted. And I always loved the smell of smoke and knew I could get addicted. And I was like, am I gonna start this just when I have no addiction to it whatsoever, and I'm fighting the addictions I have? And really, am I gonna lay another expense on our family and another, so I put it out, but it just kind of, I had my beer can there too, and I'm like, he's not asking what that is, but he's going to ask. What am I gonna tell him? That this is what's gonna destroy your life? That this is what's gonna separate you from me? Because things were getting worse. We had one night where Elsie fell off the loft, hit her head pretty good. She started puking, and I was too drunk to take him into the ER. And I was too drunk to watch the kids. Well, Brittany did it. And Brittany's like, "Oh, you want to just talk to Adam and Missy about it and see, if we can get some help?" And I said, "Okay." God's mercy again, allowing me to say, "Okay." So we talked to him, and Missy recommended AA, and I was like, "Nope." That was in March. Talked to him again in April, and Adam brought it up. I said, I pretty much I was able to be open somehow, and it seemed like the only path, the only option. Because I tried everything else, and it didn't work. So I said, "Okay." And he's like, I didn't say okay, he said, "What if I go with you?" Because I said, well, I could try it, but as soon as people aren't paying attention to me, I'm gonna quit. Like, I don't know anybody there, so I'm not gonna care what they think. So he's like, well, I'll go with you. So I was like, okay, I guess we'll do that. So started going, and everybody had a story like mine, with the drinking issue at least. And it felt like sharing Sunday, like here. Everybody, the first step of alcoholism is admitting you're powerless. And so that became a treat to go every Tuesday night and just be real with people. And after about 6 months, I felt the physical part lift. And after about a year or so, maybe a little less, I started to not think about it as much. And after about a year and a half, I didn't really think about it in any way. But I didn't care anymore. And the hardest part I realized about alcoholism for me was, in the morning afterwards, I could just feel Satan's accusing roar in my head. Said, well, looky here, you're here again, and what do you know? Like, nothing more. You're just kind of a little turd, just doing the same old thing again. How long is God going to put up with this? Huh? You're going to keep pushing His grace and asking for forgiveness, but not really sorry because you're doing it again. And I knew that was a lie. One thing that I really, I think Adam shared, I think it was maybe, I don't know if it was Tolian got it from somebody else. Who knows who it was, but he said, there's a phrase, well may the accuser roar of sins that I have done. I know of them and thousands more, Jehovah knoweth none. And that was like a mantra. It would come and it would combat this this accuser every morning. And it helped, but I was just tired of the battle. And so I was like, God, I need help. So through AA, and Adam went with me for a year, every Tuesday night. And I can't even imagine, I could never have imagined that I would have been freed from that. Just looking back, I was absolutely helpless. So, let me see here if I can, kind of wrapping it up here. I just wanted to go into like faith a little bit. God, during the struggle with alcohol, God has really showed me what faith is. He's given me a pretty clear picture, I feel like, what faith is. Adam put it really good. It's a void. Faith is a void. It's a void of my abilities. It's an area where I just can't. I try and I try and I try and I can't. And He comes in and He can. And He can restore, and He brings more than I will ever need to the table. One thing I want to share too is I've gotten this image. Ian shared it with me a couple years after I got saved. There was a monk, I think, who went to, I think it was Norway, and he was trying to share with the warrior culture who Christ was. And the warrior culture was really struggling with accepting surrender and just why Christ would die on a cross and everything, because they were kind of an honor culture. And me desiring to be a warrior my whole life, this really clicked with me, because Ian was saying, this monk described to them that Christ was the ultimate warrior, because He died on a cross, and if you think of that cross as the sword handle and the blade made of His blood going into the ground and piercing Golgotha, the skull, death, and defeating it. He defeated death by dying Himself and giving His life, just like the guy in the movie, just the ultimate sacrifice. And that really clicked with that culture, he said, and really clicked with me. So that's an image I like to keep in my head of what Christ did on the cross. And also, one thing that's really helped with when I've thought of like people going, oh, your experience is, kind of adding up to be just a drug experience or something. I struggle with that every now and then, just out of fear of man, what people may think of what really happened with me. And I'm like, well, would that be the case really if it was drugs? Because wouldn't I just kind of identify with other druggies and just like, yeah, man, that was a good high, and I would keep going after those drugs and keep chasing that dragon. It'd be pretty odd if all of a sudden, which is what happened, I clicked with, people in church who have nothing to do with drugs, people from all walks of life, all around the world. Everything that they're saying, these people who believe in Christ, all of a sudden just clicks where it never did before. All of a sudden, all the things that I learned growing up clicked, and they never did before. It was like a lock was broken, and all of a sudden I could see the light. C.S. Lewis put it really good. because this kind of wraps up too. This wasn't something that has faded since I had the experience. It's grown. He says, I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. And the things I don't know. I'm not going to be able to say it better than that, so I'm going to leave that there. A couple other things too that I just want to share with just current today stuff is my biggest fear coming up here today. Adam kind of let me know a month ago that I could have the opportunity to do this, and immediately I felt the pressure of, okay, let's get your act together so you feel good up in front of everybody. And so let's do some improving. And that immediately just felt like, just the thought of picking up that sword and trying to do God's work about made me want to spiritually puke. Luckily, Wendy shared some Napoleon sermons the last couple weeks that really spoke to me, because it's definitely what I've felt. And one thing I want to say too is the blessing that Wendy and Dwayne have been in my life. There were some times where Dwayne had the right to come and kick my ass with the way I treated his daughter. And he didn't. And that silence spoke louder words. I knew what I had done. I want to say thank you. Having mercy and allowing God to work through you. Because there's been times that's affected me where I want to say things to people. And I just think about God has worked through you guys and how mercy is more powerful than what I think is justice sometimes. This church has truly been a hospital for me. Not a museum for saints, like some think church is, but it's been a hospital for me. And a lot of, I struggle. The gospel is something, like I said the other week, I feel like an Alzheimer's patient. I'm constantly struggling to grasp the gospel. But it's, like Napoleon says again, I'm going to quote him quite a bit today. It's like, what God has done is like demanding us to jump for the moon. Sometimes I feel like I'm jumping 10 feet. Sometimes I feel like I'm sinking in mud. And we're all trying, I know, at times, but it's impossible. It doesn't keep us from measuring distances. You know, I'm always doing that. But if I can come here and get the truth about what it means to be completely covered. I'm going to end with this last quote. The Bible is one long story of God meeting our rebellion with his rescue, our sin with his salvation, our guilt with his grace, our badness with his goodness. The overwhelming focus of the Bible is not the work of the redeemed, but the work of the Redeemer, which means that the Bible is not first a recipe for Christian living, but a revelation book of Jesus, who is the answer to our unchristian living. It is finished. I can honestly say with all my heart today that God is my God. He is my Lord, my Savior, and my King. And that's all I got.